Hello everybody and welcome to our 4th episode and our first time doing a video podcast. I'm back with Sheila and you get to meet Sheila visually this time. So hi Sheila, welcome.
Oh, hello, thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the new podcast studio. So today we've got our Centenary special, and what we're going to talk about. The Queen would have been turning 100 on the 21st of April this year, and also the King Charles short speech that he did to mark the occasion, and some little ditties about that we've got to throw in as well. So let's kick off by talking about the King Charles's speech that he did and to address our nation.
Well, it was not a long speech, but I felt it came from the heart, and it was very much talking about the late Queen and his mother, and he emphasised that very greatly. And I loved some of the things that he put in there, just about her personality and her smile and everything. And funnily enough, I handed him a photograph in October 22, just about 3 weeks after the funeral, when he was in Dunfermline, and I put it into his hand, and I didn't say anything about her death or anything. My words to him were, "I will always remember the smile." And he looked at the photograph, and then he looked at me, and he said, "I quite agree with you, and thank you very much," and then took the photograph, which I believe may have ended up in Balmoral Castle, and I have no real way of knowing whether it was my photograph that was just behind the king, but from the bit that I could see, when he moved his arm and his body a little bit, it does look like a replica of the one that I took of Her Majesty in 2021, which would probably have been her last public appearance as such, certainly walking around in Scotland when she inspected the guard outside the gates of Balmoral. And the photograph that I handed him was in fact the very last close-up photograph that I ever took of the Queen, which meant a lot to me.
It's wonderful that could be an option, that picture that you took was actually used, and it shows how much he values the things that he's given from yourself and from people of our nation. Yes,
because I mean, already I know that there were 2 photographs of mine on the piano at Balmoral, and there was a documentary made about the King's first year, which went out in Boxing Day 23. And at the very end of that, when Rishi Sunak was walking into the room that is really used for meeting the Prime Minister, as the Prime Minister sat down, my photograph was on the bookshelf behind where he sat. So it's the same one that had been on the piano. So it had been moved amongst his own older photographs of members of the royal family that were official photographs. And there was that and one other that didn't belong to me, but was one of his grandmother. And again, I believe that was taken by a member of the public. From what I can see and recognise, I think I know who took that. But it's lovely to know that your photographs are dotted about the place.
Because you've given a few pictures over the years to Charles that was for his late mum, and also Camilla, I believe, as well.
I've done that a lot. So I really started off doing that in the 1980s when my photography was sort of getting hold, and I've made that a thing that I have done. I'll take a photograph of the royal family, and then when I go back to see them on the next occasion, I like to take the photograph along and hand that over. So I've done that over many, many years now. And somebody did ask Charles, when he was Prince of Wales, a long time ago, "What do you do with these photographs?" And he just kind of tapped his nose and said, "They're here and there." In other words, mind your own business.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Those are our private quarters, if you don't mind. But also, what I'll do is I'll put a picture of the picture that we're talking about that you've taken just on the screen now, and that will allow everybody to see, because they're not just like little pictures taken on a phone, they're properly taken on an SLR camera, very high quality, decent lens. And it's real good quality picture that you've taken, and shows her vibrant smile, or vibrant colours of clothing.
Yes,
that was her signature.
Because of when I took that, And what that really means a lot to me, that particular occasion, it was the 9th of August, 21, and it was the first day in Scotland you didn't have to social distance. And to think that I thought long and hard, should I go to this? Because I was nervous about mixing in with other people when I hadn't done it for so long. But then I made the decision I was going to be in the open air, I would be at the front, and I thought I was probably going to be safe enough on those grounds. So I'm so pleased that I chose to go. The Queen, when she carried that engagement out, didn't have a walking stick, didn't have anything. The only thing I would say was maybe she was a little bit thinner than she had been in 2019 when I had last seen her. But other than that, I wouldn't have really detected anything was too wrong at that point. And it was a couple of months after that we started to see her struggling. She had something that she was doing in the grounds of Balmoral at that time. And I remember seeing her there with her headscarf on. And the next time we saw her, she was having difficulty, I think, getting into or out of her car with a walking stick. And so whatever happened happened in those next 2 months, really.
Yes. It was quite a quick thing. And although you could see her getting more frail, which was age related and also just what happens, but it did happen very quickly.
It did. And then, of course, she couldn't do the things that she wanted to do for the Platinum Jubilee. But I was at the Platinum Jubilee and I did get the 2 balcony appearances. The last one, the second one of the 2, meant so much just to be part of that crowd. But when I stood, and I did get pretty near to the palace and near to the balcony on that occasion, I couldn't get my SLR camera up at that point. It was so tightly packed, I had to use my mobile phone. And the funny part of that was Valerie Singleton was one of the celebrities on a little stage that the BBC had got built there because it was all part of the celebrations, and Valerie Singleton was at the very end of that. And the funny thing about that was she was kind of in my way a little bit with her hand waving, but she was as enthusiastic as anybody else. And at the end of the day, I grew up watching Blue Peter, and Valerie Singleton was my Blue Peter person, really, along with Chris Trace and then eventually Peter Purvis and John Noakes. So to see her there at that occasion being so excited was good. But it was the Queen, and as I stood watching her, I did have that sinking feeling, was I looking at something for the very last time? Which of course came to be the case. So that was my actual last sighting of her. Okay.
She signed up Liz Truss as the new Prime Minister.
Liz Truss went to Balmoral
and it was less
to
than
be
24
sworn
hours.
in up there and meet the Queen, and that was in fact the very last time anybody saw her, because that was the Tuesday and she died on the Thursday.
My story of that was we, as a family, so myself, my wife and daughter went down to Windsor for Legoland at that time. But the ironic thing was that the Queen was here. She was in Scotland.
That's right. Yeah.
So we were there and everything halted because she had passed away. And Legoland closed for the day after it closed, because we were near the end of the day when the news came out that she had passed. So then that happened. So the next day we didn't really know what to do. And then when we found out where she was, we found that she was actually in Scotland. But we live in Scotland, so it was a strange series of events. So we went back again about a year later, and we're like, let's hope that it's not us. And thankfully, I can tell you all, nothing happened as far as we know. And I don't know. I sound like I'm incriminating myself. It had nothing to do with us. No, I'm only kidding around. So that was the strange series of events for us.
I mean, for me, being somebody living in Scotland, and by the time she died, I had gone down to working only 3 days. So I was a teacher and I didn't work on a Monday and a Friday. So I knew pretty much by the time I left work on the Thursday that I thought something was fairly imminent, and of course indeed it was. And I wanted desperately to drive to Balmoral and go up there and pay my respects up there, but I felt that wouldn't have really been a safe thing for me to do at that particular point. So I got out a lot of my old photographs and photographed some of them and put them on my phone so as I could just go through them and look at them and everything. And on the Saturday, I went through to Edinburgh to Holyrood and laid some flowers at Holyrood and spent a bit of time looking at the flowers that people had put in the grounds just at the side of Holyrood Palace. And what was touching about that was some of the little children that had written things, and one of them had written something about her little sister was up in heaven and had sent this message to the Queen to say, I'm glad you're there with my little sister looking after her. And there were all these Paddington bears and the marmalade sandwiches and everything. And that was just, there was just something very moving about that. So I went through to Canongate on the Sunday and joined the service. So Canongate was special to me because the Queen had obviously attended that every so often when she was in residence at Holyrood. She would attend the services. So I'd spoken to her a number of times outside. So going into the service meant a lot. And I just wanted to go in and be part of the service, which is what it was. And I didn't expect any particular reference to her. So I was quite surprised when the Minister, Neil Gardiner, did give a bit of a story about it. He told us 2 stories about the Queen when he became chaplain to it, when he first was the minister at Canongate. And I think he wrote to her and said to her, you're welcome to come, or I'm inviting you to the service. And apparently the letter came back to him, you don't need to bother inviting the Queen to the service. If she wants to attend it, she'll attend it.
Of course,
which
yes.
was the thing. And I think he was just telling us that as an amusing thing. And when Zara got married, Princess Anne's daughter got married, that of course happened at Canongate, and indeed I was outside when that happened. But the Queen had apparently been in discussion with him, the minister, some weeks before that, and he said, well, you've got to have different people on different sides of the service, and then to move the seats around so that the seat, I think, where the Queen was going to sit would be in a different place. So when she arrived at the church for the service, she said to him, and where is it I'm going to be sitting? Where's my seat? Because she had a fixed pew that she sat in. And so I think that was a bit light-hearted. It was a nice thing for the way he did it.
Of course.
I think it probably was good for the congregation, who would be the regular congregation, along with anyone else that had chosen to go in there. I felt that was it was a lovely service. I felt quite content when I came out of there. And then I stood in the Royal Mile and waited for a number of hours for Princess Anne to return down the Royal Mile with the late Queen back to Holyrood. So
that's lovely.
Yeah.
For the Centenary, it would have been a big, massive event. It would have been a landmark moment in history, I would have thought.
It would have, yes.
Yeah. And you can only imagine from what they did at the Jubilee.
Yes, it would have. There would have been.
How big it would have been.
Oh, it would have been massive. There were so many people there for the Jubilees I attended, which was the gold and the diamond and the platinum. I was in London for all 3 of those, so I couldn't begin to imagine the number of people that would have been there. Had she made it to 100. But I'm pleased that that they've recognised it in some way. It has been lovely, that they've done that, and I'm looking forward to going to the exhibition at the King's Gallery. That is almost sold out.
Okay.
I was astounded at how quickly that has sold out. The best I've managed to get is a ticket. I'm going with a friend that lives in Norfolk, and the best I've got is like the 8th of June.
Okay.
And almost at the end of the day. But I have got a ticket for Holyrood. They're having a special exhibition there where they're going to show people the private apartments there that the Queen and the Duke would have used. So I managed to get a ticket for that, and it's only for a one-off this year. So I was pleased to go, and I got a ticket to go to that because on a couple of occasions I did see the Queen on the occasions of garden parties looking out of the window, including in 2007 when I was at the garden party. She was standing at a window looking out over the grounds while I was actually inside the grounds of Holyrood waiting for her to come out. So that was quite a moment. So to be able to just go in and just have a wee look at the apartments there, they're going to give us guided tours of that prior to, and then you can go around Holyrood in the normal way.
I observed when I was watching the video that you shared to me with the King Charles's speech that he had done. I tried to avoid seeing the King's speech because it's such a big thing already, as in a film and all that. So I don't want people to get confused. But King Charles's speech that he did for the centenary that we're talking about, within that, there was lots of lovely throwback, flashback pictures and videos of the gallery that you're talking about, with all the family and the lineup. And it's symbolic of everybody's family, how it goes through peaks and troughs of having a huge amount of members on the family, and then it depletes down as life takes course, and then it will build back up over time again with hopefully the younger generations that are coming through.
Yes, that's right. Because at the moment we've got a lack of working royals that are of a younger generation, if I can put it that way, because we obviously have William and Catherine as the Prince and Princess of Wales, and then obviously immediately after that is their 3 children. Now, William and Catherine are obviously in their 40s. The 3 children are too young to be doing anything at the moment, and that'll be the same for quite some considerable time. And then we jump to the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, Edward and Sophie. Now, Edward and Sophie are obviously 60ish. They're in their 60s. Edward's 62 now. But he's still younger than our king.
Of course. So what age is our king?
So he's 77.
77.
He's 77. Okay. So, and then you have Princess Royal, who's 2 years younger than him. So she's 75 currently. And then you have the Queen Camilla, who's just slightly old. I think she's 79 this year. She's 78 at the moment. And then you have a group of other working royals, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, and the Duke of Kent and his sister Princess Alexandra, who are both around about 90. So they're all working royals.
Of course.
So the working royals are to the older generation, and there's not so many of the younger ones, because obviously we have some people that are no longer working royals that would have obviously made up the numbers in some ways. But it's interesting to watch as a family. There's a lovely picture taken Christmas 1971, I think, and it's a big gathering at Windsor Castle, as it was at that particular point. Was it 81? Yeah, it must have been 81. No, 71. A big gathering of them all in Windsor Castle, and you've got all these little children in the picture. And I loved that. As you know, I was a bit older than them, but not by that much. They were my generation, really. And of course, all those children are now all grown up with families of their own and everything. And it's I still think that's a lovely photo of all the extended members of the royal family that you used to see a lot. But you still do see some of them. So Sarah Chatto, for example, Princess Margaret's daughter, is often at Sandringham or in other places and very close to the king. She was at the last week when they were looking at the exhibition in London. She was part of who had gone to that exhibition.
Of course.
She was there with them. So it's lovely that those sort of links, I think, of that generation are there, and she would have been close to the Queen.
There is still a vast number of them there. Yes. I think sometimes, especially within family and things like that as well, I do notice that you do go through these peaks and troughs, but you sit around the dinner table, whatever, and then you start to go, oh, wait a minute. The table's getting smaller, and then the next generation comes along and helps boost that.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a nice thing, and I think that's happened multiple times throughout that last 100 years.
Oh yes,
where Queen Elizabeth was there for a long time.
She was, and that's
one of the longest serving.
Yes, she was the longest serving queen, and I think she reigned from such a young age as well. She really did reign from such a long age. And, you know, for many people in this country, she's the only monarch that people knew. You know, so that was the same for me, the same for you, and many others. So you have to go to my mother's age group to know, you know, several other monarchs, because she obviously had George V.
Yes.
And she would have had George VI, and in between that, she was obviously Edward VIII for that very short space of time as well. So, you know, and she was born in 1918. So that generation had those extra monarchs in there.
Yes. It's amazing how encyclopedic you are with all this information. You do a lot of talks publicly within Scotland.
The history was always my thing, and I think that's helped me to remember dates, but I do seem to have a photographic memory for dates, but that this part of history has always interested me, and therefore the dates just kind of trip off my tongue. If you start talking to me about dates to do with things maybe elsewhere, I'm not going to be able to do that.
You'd mentioned to me, because we chat things through before we come onto these podcasts so that we can have interesting topics for you all, but your scrapbook that you had made up. So please tell our listeners about that.
I started a scrapbook in the early 1960s. So I lived in London at that point, and my first page must be something I've cut out of a paper, and it's all the London bridges. And then you turn to the next page and you've got a picture of Prince Andrew as a little boy. So Prince Andrew is 2 years and 2 months exactly younger than me. So it's not surprising that the youngest of the royals, as they were was at that time, that's who ended up on page 2 of my scrapbook.
Of course.
And then beside that is a picture of Prince Edward as a baby that was in the paper. So you can see by the time we've got to 1964, my scrapbook has become not just a scrapbook of general things, it's mostly royal things. And that becomes truer. Winston Churchill died in 65, and there's cuttings of the Queen visiting Downing Street, and there's lots of bits about Winston Churchill in there. My mum went to the lying in state of Winston Churchill, and then there was the funeral. And the very first outside broadcast of that type that I ever watched was Winston Churchill's funeral with the Queen, you know, and the royal family attending that. And that was might have been my interest. I'm not sure, but I sat and watched that whole broadcast, and that was another aspect of you know, I think me following history and the things that were happening around that time was just the start of my everlasting interest in the royal family, because I'd got books and things by that time as well, picking guidebooks about the Queen and picking guidebooks about the royal family. So even as a child in 5, 6, 7, so that's how the scrapbook came to happen, because I lived in London, a bus ride away from Buckingham Palace. So regularly I was on the number 16 bus, getting off at Hyde Park Corner, down Constitution Hill, past the Palace, Green Park, Clarence House that you could walk up and down outside, through St James's Palace, through St James's Park rather, Westminster Abbey, back round Horse Guards Parade, and back up to the Palace to walk back to get the bus. And when I was 4 years old, so 1961 probably, that would have been 61, 62, I was on that route somewhere near the Victoria Memorial, and the car containing the Queen passed by. All I remember was seeing the Queen and something yellow and a pair of white gloves waving at me. So I was 4 at the time. So that's 64 years ago.
Well, you're wearing yellow today, so that's symbolic of that. That was a subliminal there.
But I've stood in that spot so many times when you were allowed to stand in that bit, and stood there because it was perfect viewpoint for seeing the balcony and things for many, many years. Now they seem to think that's a security risk to stand on that side of the road. Apart from last year, they did let some people in because there'd nowhere to put them, but for a number of years we've been moved from standing there for royal events, and it was a great place to stand and watch everything. So I've got many memories of that bit of pavement. So I will always, there's a lamp post there, and I'll always remember that bit of pavement, I kind of claim the lamppost as my own in a way.
Of course.
Because that is roughly where I first saw the Queen. And at 4 years old, I would never have dreamt that I would have been photographing her, meeting her, that she knew who I was. I would never have thought of any of those things at that age. Well, you wouldn't. You wouldn't think. And I moved from London in January 1967 to Scotland, and that became a bit further away from me. But my interest never changed. It was it was an interest passed on to me by my late mum. She had the same interest, and that's where I got it from. And there's no two ways about that. That's where I got it from. But she wasn't taking photographs. She wasn't doing any of those things. People didn't do that. There was no meeting royal family or anything in those days when she first got interested. But like me, she was a child. She was 8 years older than the Queen. And she remembers the Queen. She remembered the Queen being born. She used to picnic in the park. Richmond Park, and King George V and Queen Mary would pass by and wave. And she was on a bus one day with her father, I think 1932. So she was 14 at the time, I think she told me. And she was passing near Brunton Street where the Queen was born, somewhere in that vicinity, and the Queen would have been 6 years old, and she saw this little girl looking out of what was probably the nursery window on the upper floor. She saw it from the double-decker bus, so she's always told me she'd seen the Queen. She was quite pleased to reveal that she'd seen the Queen in her pyjamas, because I guess she was in the nursery and just looking out the window as a child might do.
Of course.
So I don't know how many people can claim they've seen the Queen in her pyjamas, but my mum made
Wonder if she wore a hat.
No, I don't.
As part of her pajamas.
No idea. I don't know. But that was her claim to fame, anyway.
It's always wholesome when you hear a child's observations of anything.
Well, my mum was 14 at the time, but that's what she reckoned she'd seen through the bus window. And I have no reason to disbelieve her.
No, of course
at
not.
all. So she taught that. She repeated that a number of times to people.
Well, it's always good to have a nice anecdote.
Point,
exactly.
Yeah.
We spoke previously about how you had done some filming for the One show and how that hadn't been used.
Yes.
Well, spoiler? No, I'll let you tell.
Well, on Tuesday afternoon, about 4:00, so the 21st of April, I got an email. Luckily, I received the email in time from the researcher of the One show saying they wanted to do something about the Queen's what would have been the Queen's 100th birthday to mark that occasion. And they had found some footage that had been filmed, and could they use it? So I had to sign a consent form for them to release it. So I didn't know how much they would use or what it was going to look like, because that was recorded in March 2022, and it was originally to be for the Platinum Jubilee, and then I was told just before I went to film it that they were going to use it if the Queen passed away, and it didn't get used at that point, but they wanted to use it now, so I didn't know what it was going to be, but I went from Glasgow to London by train, went to the Shard, 33rd, 4th floor of the Shard, which was a lovely experience in itself. Met Jenny Bond, who didn't remember me. I had spoken to Jenny Bond on a number of occasions for the Queen Mother's birthday. I was interviewed by her a number of occasions, but I didn't do enough travelling about the country. Because Jenny Bond would go to lots of events that the Queen would have been at, but I was teaching, so I only did things in the summer months mostly.
Of course.
And Jenny Bond wasn't necessarily there. The Queen Mother's birthday was her big thing. And then, of course, she gave up being the royal correspondent for the BBC just after 2002, I think. So naturally, she wasn't somebody I was seeing all the time, but she definitely interviewed me a few times. But I had a lovely chat with her. She made me feel very much at ease. It really was. It was lovely, and she explained, how they were going to film it, and they filmed me, and then they filmed her. and she put her words in, and what went out on television wasn't the way I expected it to be in a way, but it was lovely just to see it. And they had, I'd forgotten I'd submitted photographs to them, so they had used some of the photographs that I'd given to them of my meetings with the Queen over the years.
Yes.
And they had just put in a little piece about that. Jenny was obviously explaining about the fact that I'd handed over photographs, and she did know who I was. And I do know that is perfectly correct, that she did know who I was, because I was up at Crathy Sailor Work in 1997. With a friend, and I wasn't standing beside him, and he handed her a photograph I'd taken, and the Queen asked him if he could spare the photograph. And he said, yes, I've got this from Sheila, I can get another one. And she stopped looking at him and looked directly at me, and it was at that moment I realised she knew my name. She wouldn't use it, but she knew who I was, and she did know roughly where I came from as well. I proved that some years later, when the Forth and Clyde Valley Hospital was opened, and she was introducing a friend, Mary, who came from Norfolk, was with me, and she said to the Lord Lieutenant, and this lady comes from Norfolk, and then she said, and this lady comes from somewhere round about here, and went with a circle with her finger to point out that was me. She wasn't going to lay claim to exactly where I come from, but she knew it was roughly this area.
Of course.
And it was a lovely feeling to think, this is the Queen, and she actually knew who I was. It was fine. And I'm not saying that I'm not the only one that was in that position. There were a number of people that were like that, but it was a lovely feeling.
It's nice.
Which is why I was pleased that went out for the centenary of our birth. I felt that although I'd waited over 4 years to see it, having that as a sort of a tribute, if you like, for me, because I was the only member of the public that was included in that, made that sort of a special moment for me. Of course
it does, yes.
It was lovely.
Finally nice to see it come through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so I put something on Facebook on Tuesday with some of my early photographs and some of the photographs taken in more recent times. Just wanted to really pay a tribute to what the late Queen had sort of meant to me. And I can only say that my late mum was really how I got involved in it, because she had that interest in the royal family in the 1920s, growing up in London, and in the 1930s when she went along to different things. And I suppose she didn't force me to do it. It was just an interest that naturally developed. I was probably in the right part of the world at that particular point, and I couldn't know as I got older that history was going to become my thing. It was very much my thing at school, and particularly the bit about the royals. So it was the Tudors and the Stuarts, but particularly the Tudors that it captivated me. I went to Hampton Court in 1969, and I was totally absorbed in Henry VIII and his wives. And I can honestly say that that's probably where the history angle came from, along with Henry VIII, Elizabeth R, and Henry VII, that were broadcast by the BBC in 69, 70, 71, and a bit later on Edward VII, which was ITV's production of Edward VII. And I think those historical broadcasts helped to bring it all to life for me.
Of course.
Very much so. I think my history interest, alongside my interest in the sort of royal family of the 20th century and going back to Queen Victoria's era, but then going back further because the Tudors was something that I was fascinated by that. And over the years that hasn't really changed. I still have that keen interest in all of that, and the dates and everything that went with that, all that historical stuff. But I definitely think the productions that went out on television in the 70s helped with that, and the films that were made as well. And for a lot of people, it would bring it alive at that point.
Yes, of course.
I think the visual thing helps to bring that alive in a big way.
It definitely does. A lot of people who don't necessarily follow or see a different version of events within newspapers or whatever. It gives them a chance to actually see it, well, a dramatised version, of course, but the recent Netflix one, for example, that was, although it told its story in its own path, it was relatively close to
The Crown. If you're talking about The Crown,
it
yes,
was relatively close.
It was. There were
points.
Parts of that I thought were extremely good, and there were bits of that you had to realise that they had to fill the programme. So it was drama. So but
that's normal for anything,
it's
though.
It's normal for that. So it was a drama series. Yeah. People took some of that and thought it was real.
Okay.
So there were parts of that were true, and parts of it that were made up because it was a drama series. Yeah. And I think as long as you watched it knowing that, it was all right. I think some people watched it and believed every aspect of it. And I think that's where it gets,
it kind of went off.
It gets difficult. But no, it was good. And I think going back to my late mum's interest in everything, she didn't have the interest in photography that I developed. So I developed that alongside my interest in history. And they've been my two main things throughout my life, the photography side of things and history. They are both things that are tangible things that I can see that I've enjoyed. It's not what I did for a career. I was a home economics teacher, but the history was actually, when I was at school, it was probably one of my best subjects at school. And, and it's maintained.
Yes.
That has maintained it, particularly British history, I think. But my late mum was very, very keen on the Queen and the Queen Mother, but her ultimate favourite, I think, was our present King.
Okay.
Because she really respected him, but she was interested in him from when he was born.
Okay.
And I think she got into trouble. She went to Green Park when he was maybe a little boy of 2 or 3 and was there with his sister, Princess Anne. She knew where to go in Green Park, and they wheeled the two of them out with the nanny, going for a walk in Green Park. And I don't know where she was, but the detective turned round to her and said, "Please don't get so close," or something. So I don't know where she was too near. I mean, she wasn't given for creeping around after people, but in those days, she knew, obviously, you'd got more access to that kind of thing, and I think she was just somewhere near a tree watching what was happening, so she must have just been a bit too close on that one occasion. But she wasn't taking photographs, she was just there watching something. But she was very interested in the Prince of Wales, and her main thing was she would love to have seen him become king, but she realised that wasn't probably going to happen in her lifetime. And she didn't live long enough to see him married either to Queen Camilla, which she would have been totally in favour of. She thought Camilla was absolutely lovely.
It certainly seems that now where everybody's in a positive mindset about that.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's a modern world thing.
I think so. I think my mum and our friend Mary, who lives in Norfolk, who's now 92, the two of them took flowers along to present them to Camilla the day after the Sandringham Flower Show in 2002. It's a thing called Music and Country Churches. And I think they were probably the first 2 people to actually hand over flowers to Camilla, because she wasn't doing things in a public way at that point. That was the first opportunity. And the Prince of Wales sent his detective over to say thank you for doing that, because it meant a lot to the Prince of Wales that we were kind of accepting that. And I've just, all I can say about Queen Camilla is she's an absolutely delightful person to meet and to know. I can't, the conversations and things are just lovely. As were the conversations I had with the late Queen up at Crathy Church, or Crathy Sailor Work was the best place in Britain to see her. She was at her most relaxed there because press weren't there, and what you saw was her humour coming over to such an extent that one day, at one of those, and I can't remember which year it was now, It was round about the time the statue of Eric Morecambe had been unveiled, and there was a lady there that followed the royal family from Lancaster, and she said something to the Queen about this Eric Morecambe statue, and as quick as a flash, the Queen had her arm up and lifted her leg and was in the Eric Morecambe pose, but it was gone before you even knew it had happened. She was so quick.
Yes.
Because, nobody could have captured that.
Okay.
But I thought the arm going up and doing that was her wit.
Yeah.
And that was, I think it was a side of the Queen that people wouldn't know and wouldn't see.
Well, she had to suppress it for the position that she was in.
She was in it. So it was and being about the Crathy Sailor work, she was in holiday mode when she was there. It was part of what she did as a holiday. She was simply going to visit the local sale in the church. So she wasn't written down she was doing it. She would just turn up. I mean, people knew she was going, but it wasn't down as an engagement. She just went to it. She walked through the hall. She came out. And she came over and she spoke to the people that were there. And when I first started going to it in the early 90s, and she'd done it for a long, long time before that, every 2 years, it was mostly local people. A bit later on, more people came from down south, more familiar people that she would have recognised turned up from down south and things, which was, that was lovely. They enjoyed it as well. But when I first went to it, it was much more people on holiday, people that were local to that area, and, 2 or 3 of us that lived in Scotland got the chance to go along. But she started that with her sister and her mother. They had a stall at it in the 1950s. And of course, it hasn't happened. 2019 was the last time it happened. They haven't resurrected it after the pandemic. And I think now it's probably not going to resurrect itself. So that was in fact the last time I spoke to Her Majesty the Queen was at that event.
You've been taking pictures for many years as an observer of the royal family, and it all started, I believe, with an Instamatic camera.
Yes, so my mum had an Ilford camera that I started using for holidays in 1970, and it was like a spool with 12 in it. So I've got that 1970, 71, and at some point in 72, I think I acquired an Instamatic camera. And that was what I had. And I didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't working. I was obviously a child at school. And I think developing photographs was fairly expensive. But I saved up money I got for holidays and things. And gradually through the 70s, the number of photographs I took on holiday expanded. So instead of taking 12 that I'd started with, by the time you were about 1974, I might have been coming home with 100 and something. And so during that period, that's what I was doing. I wasn't photographing the royal family. I wasn't in contact with them at all. I was following what was happening, but I wasn't going anywhere where I could do that. By that time, I'd moved to going to Wales on holiday. And we had lots of holidays in North Wales for a good number of years. But in 1977, I'd left school, so I was in my first year at Queen's College, and the Silver Jubilee came to Glasgow. So armed with my Instamatic camera and my day off from college, which was a Monday holiday, I think, Hope Street in Glasgow, and there I stood with my Instamatic camera and got this one photograph of the Queen, and if you study it carefully, the Queen and the Duke are just in the photograph. But when I do my talks that I've been doing to sort of church groups and the SWI that I'm in, I put that in because I think it illustrates where my photography started. And I've carried on taking photographs. I didn't go to the big royal wedding, which was Diana and Charles obviously getting married in 81, because we'd already pre-booked our holiday to Wales. So I didn't go to that one. I just decorated the car with, I had a mini Metro, and I decorated the car and watched. We hired a colour television because it was black and white that was in the flat that we were staying in. So we went to Radio Rentals and hired a colour television so that we could see it in colour.
Of course.
And then after that, I think the time I got to midway through the 80s, I was starting to put more in. I met the King, well, Prince of Wales as he was at that time, in Rhyl for the first time. He was at Rhyl Station. He'd been at an event in North Wales, and that's where I first spoke to him. In fact, the other week I was at St Asaph Cathedral, and I handed him that photograph, and he looked at it and he said, "Oh, that's a bit old," but he took it from me. So, and it's just one of these things. That's where
nice gift. Yeah,
it has kind of stemmed from there. And the Queen was in Glasgow in 1986, July. So it would be about a week after Andrew and Sarah's wedding. I was back home from my holiday. I was down south, and I was at that wedding. That was the first big occasion I went to in London of that sort, Andrew and Sarah's wedding. And so I was back home from that, having come back from my holiday, and went along to Glasgow Cathedral. And that was the very first place that I got a close-up of the Queen and spoke to her. So that was the start of my journey.
So there we go. That's us with the Centenary. It's just a wonderful occasion to mark, and also thinking about everything that's happened throughout those 100 years, and even like in my lifetime, the things that we've gone through. A lot of people that you lose that are very well known people, family members. But also the really good things that have happened, the special occasions that we've celebrated with the royal family, the Golden Jubilee, then it would have been the Centenary, as we said, it would have been a massive celebration. So it'd be silly for us not to mark it with
she was such
podcast.
I think she was such a special person, and I think iconic is and probably the best known person that the world is ever going to really know.
That's true.
In terms of a person like the Queen.
And as a royal family, like obviously we've got nothing but positive things to say, but there's a lot of that has to go into living up to that legacy that she has made happen. She worked very, very hard and brought a world together, not just as a British nation, but a world. She created the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And that really, they need to work hard to keep that going, I would think. Yes, I mean, when I was at the funeral, the atmosphere when I went and camped out for 26 hours for her funeral, that was quite an amazing thing. Yeah. It really was. 26 hours, wow. It took me a second to register that.
That's what I had to do to get my position where I wanted to be. And I'm glad. I don't regret 1 minute of that. It was a bit emotional when the crown eventually went up the mall. That was a special moment. But the sun came out. The sun was in and out. We got wet. The sun was out. The sunlight shone over Westminster Abbey when the funeral was on, and then subsequently as the procession came up the mall, and it was sparkling on her as she passed by. And that's a thing I'll always remember, because so much of many of the times I met her, it could be raining and then suddenly the sun would burst out. And I think there was just something about that made that equally, a special moment.
In some ways, I suppose, they're rock stars to yourself. The way that you have that pure interest that
yes, it's an interest that I have that. Some people probably think, well, that's a silly thing for somebody to be doing.
The fact is that there's, as you say, there's so many people that have the same interest as you. The fact of how quickly those tickets sold out, that shows you how many people are interested.
Yes. I think, I'm desperate to go to that exhibition to see what's included in it, because I think it will be special. I don't recall anything like that at the King's Gallery selling out in quite that way. I don't know whether there are tickets left for later on in the in the the time it's on. But I think it is something that's really a special thing, and obviously we've seen bits of it in the news, and I think that's probably spurred people to go and see it.
That's brilliant. So let's all keep this legacy going and of our late Queen, and let's hope that our royal family can keep doing all the wonderful things that she's created.
Yes, I think it's going to a different generation, and I think the generation below, the king, the next generation, seeing the Prince and Princess of Wales in Stirling, as I did in January, they're doing things their way. But equally, to be in Stirling and my frozen hand as I stood outside there, and you've got Prince William coming out and shaking hands with me, realising my hand is cold, and then he's rubbing my hand to warm it up. So it's a different era we're in, but it's equally lovely to see.
Brilliant. I think we'll finish up on that one. That's quite a magical memory as well. William rubbing your hand just to make sure that it's warm. It shows the wholesomeness, and I think that's a great place to leave this, because that's what we're all about on this podcast, is showing just how human they are, how nice they are. That's the important message that we're trying to put across here. So don't listen to propaganda. Listen to Sheila. Only in the nicest way. Yeah. But I must say that obviously we're not affiliated with them. We're just observing our royal family. That's that's important as well. So thank you very much, Sheila. It's been great to have you on screen. And we'll be back shortly with another of our podcasts when we've got quality content for you. Okay, thank you everybody. Take care.